I never expected the truth about my marriage to arrive in the mouth of a Labrador retriever. That might sound like the opening to a joke, or maybe the beginning of a children's book, but I assure you nothing that followed felt lighthearted. The first time Max, the neighbor's dog, trotted into my yard with something that didn't belong to him, I saw no omen in it. He was carrying a crumpled coffee receipt, clamped delicately between his teeth like a proud trophy. I remember laughing at him. His tail wagged as though he'd just come home from war with evidence of a heroic victory. I took the receipt from him, patted his head, and threw it in the kitchen trash without a second thought. It wasn't until much later that I realized that tiny slip of paper had marked the beginning of an unraveling, one tug that loosened the entire thread of my marriage. But before I get ahead of myself, I should explain a few things. My name doesn't matter for this story. Neither does the exact location of the neighborhood I lived in or the street's name. What matters is that it was a quiet suburb, the kind of place where people waved from their driveways, but rarely invited each other over. My wife Anna and I had lived there for 7 years when everything happened. Our home wasn't remarkable. Red shutters, a neat lawn, a few rose bushes she insisted on trimming herself. It was peaceful, predictable, or so I thought. The people next door, the Collins family, had a dog named Max. He was an overly friendly golden Labrador with an unfortunate habit of assuming everyone wanted to play fetch, even if they hadn't agreed to, even if they hadn't thrown anything in the first place. Max would wander into our yard often, dropping sticks, tennis balls, half-chewed squeaky toys, whatever he managed to drag along. I never minded. I worked from home as an editor, and Max's visits were sometimes the most exciting part of my afternoon. But on a Tuesday morning in early spring, he brought me something new, a coffee shop receipt with my wife's name on it. At the time, I thought nothing of it. Maybe it had blown into the yard from the trash. Maybe it stuck to the bottom of her shoe the day before. Anna liked coffee shops more than I did. She went often. Nothing about the situation seemed strange. The second item Max brought a week later seemed slightly odder. It was a house key. It didn't fit any of our locks, and the keychain, bright red, shaped like a heart, didn't look familiar. When I asked Anna about it, she shrugged. Probably an old key from one of the previous owners, she said. Or maybe Max stole it out of someone's bag. That dog picks up anything shiny. She tossed the key into the junk drawer, kissed me on the cheek, and left for a yoga class. I remember staring into the drawer afterward. The key lay there with its red heart, out of place among rubber bands and dried-up pens. I didn't suspect anything at that point, only felt that tickle of mild curiosity you experience when something doesn't quite line up, but isn't important enough to pursue. If the story ended there, with a stray receipt and a misplaced key, I'd probably still be sitting on the back porch with a cup of tea, watching the sunlight hit Anna's roses. But stories, unfortunately, rarely end in their most peaceful moments. They end where the truth insists they must. The third item Max delivered came on an unusually warm Friday afternoon. He bounded into the yard carrying a torn corner of a photograph. I only picked it up because I recognized the handwriting on the back. Anna's looping cursive, unmistakable. I turned the scrap of photo over. Only a man's shoulder was visible. A white dress shirt, a bit of a blazer, nothing else. The rest had been ripped away. That was when the first real suspicion, the kind you feel in your gut, not your mind, stirred. The three items together formed something like a constellation. Not enough to name a shape or story, but enough to notice the stars existed. Still, I didn't accuse Anna. I've never been the kind of man to leap toward conclusions. Maybe that's a flaw. Maybe it's a virtue. Depends who you ask, I suppose. Instead, I watched. Quietly, carefully, patiently. Anna was a teacher, English literature at the local high school. She had always been dedicated, often staying late to grade papers or help students with college essays. I never doubted her. We met in our 20s, married by 30, settled into the comfortable rhythm of life together. She wasn't dramatic. She wasn't impulsive. She was steady, warm, and reliable, which is why the oddities began to feel heavier than they should. On Monday evenings, she started taking walks to clear her head. On Thursdays, she came home smelling like a brand of cologne I didn't own. On Sundays, she said she needed me time, which was reasonable, but her returns grew later and later. It wasn't dramatic enough to confront. Not yet, and I still didn't want to believe anything had changed. But Max did. Maybe. One afternoon, I decided to see where Max went when he wandered into our yard. As soon as Anna left for an errand, he appeared at the fence, sniffed around impatiently, then dashed through a gap he must have used countless times unnoticed. I followed him discreetly, feeling faintly ridiculous. Following a dog? What was I expecting to find? A secret door, a buried suitcase, a confession. Max trotted on purposefully, tail high, nose to the ground, into a narrow strip behind the Collins' shed. He sniffed a particular spot and pawed at the soil. When he ran off again, I crouched to see what he'd found. A scarf, a takeout bag for two, a note half crumpled and half buried. Sorry for earlier. Talk tonight? M. My name doesn't start with M. My breathing stayed calm, controlled, though the world around me felt strangely silent. I washed the dirt off the items, placed them on the kitchen table, and stared. Sometimes the ground beneath you doesn't collapse, but it shifts, enough to warn that the landscape has changed irreversibly. I waited for Anna to come home. She did, cheerful, humming lightly. I said nothing, not ready yet, not because I feared her answer, but because I feared my own reaction. I had promised myself I wouldn't let anger guide me. The betrayal revealed itself calmly 2 days later. Max bounded toward a man kneeling to scratch his ears. From the back porch, I watched silently. The man froze when he saw me. Ordinary dark brown hair, early 40s, business casual attire, eyes wide with shock. "I take it you're Anna's husband," he said. I nodded. "I guess she didn't tell you about me." "No," I said evenly. He exhaled, rubbed his neck. "I just needed to see her. One last time." "What's your name?" I asked. "Michael. She used to call me M." My eyes flicked to the note on the table. "How long?" I asked calmly. "A few months. We met at that cafe near the school, the one with the green umbrellas." "Did she tell you she's ending things?" he asked softly. "No," I said. "Well, she did. A week ago. That's why you found those items. I left them near the fence so Max would bring them to you." "You used the dog?" I said. "I know it sounds terrible. I didn't want to hurt you, but she kept saying she'd tell you herself." Max nudged my hand for attention. I stroked his ears. "You should talk to her," Michael said. "Whatever you decide is your choice." He turned and left, Max following briefly before returning to me. When Anna came home that night, she chatted lightly, asked about dinner. Only then did I say, "I spoke to someone today." "Who?" "Michael." Her smile faded, breath caught. I told her everything plainly. She apologized, explained, tried to give context, but no explanation makes betrayal acceptable. I listened. When she finished, I nodded. The scarf, note, and takeout bag remained on the table, evidence of a truth delivered gently, silently. Betrayal doesn't always explode. Sometimes it arrives quietly, leaving stillness. We separated a few months later, not violently but gently, like drifting branches. Sometimes I sit on that porch. Max runs to me, tail wagging. Maybe he misses me more than they do. He never lied. He delivered the truth, piece by piece, tail wagging, waiting for me to notice. Eventually I did, but not before Max showed me, quite literally, that he knew too much. Dear subscribers, if you have a story you believe is worth sharing, feel free to send it to us by email, storytimelounge320@gmail.com. We'll be happy to take a look, and it just might become the story featured in our next video.